Hello, I'm Regina Botras, and this is Backstage, where we talk with the who's who on stage, in dance, comedy, and performing arts, speaking with the leading theatre makers of our times and how they came to the stage and what drives them and inspires them. I'm joined by Mark Leonard Winter, and he is playing Mark Antony in Julius Caesar, Bell Shakespeare production. This is his debut to Bell Shakespeare, but he is a celebrated actor known for his performances across major companies, including Sydney Theatre Company, Melbourne Theatre Company, and founding member of Black Lung. Helpmann Award for Best Male Actor for his performance in Birdland. He's also been on our small screens and big screens. You sure have seen him somewhere before. Welcome, Mark, to Stages.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
So you are getting fantastic reviews, but before we get into your role and how you came to find Mark Antony in this production, it's a Roman history play. Do you want to set the scene for listeners?
Yeah, the context of the play is that Julius Caesar has just defeated his sort of rival Pompey the Great, and he won a sort of civil war against him essentially. And he has now accumulated so much power that the sort of the power center of Rome is starting to get worried that he may become a king. And the Romans are extremely wary of kings. You know, their system of government is set up as such, is the power shared structure, and they're suddenly getting very and may essentially take the country for himself. So that's sort of the context for which the play sort of begins, and from there a sort of conspiracy is hatched to potentially assassinate Caesar.
And you're Mark Antony, Caesar's ally.
That's right. It's sort of sort of Mark Antony ends up becoming, quite a major sort of historical figure, but it's interesting sort of looking at him in this play because this is sort of Mark Antony's coming of age. It's the birth of sort of Mark Antony in a way, and it's a really curious role to play because he's essentially Caesar's right-hand man. He loves him, worships him, um, and but in the first half of the play, he's essentially described as drunk, as a party guy, as a womanizer, and not necessarily a serious person. In part, this is sort of what causes many problems for the conspirators, for Brutus and Cassius in the play, because they kind of overlook him as a potential threat. I mean, Cassius has an instinct that this guy could be dangerous if they do successfully kill Caesar, but Brutus eventually sort of overrules him and says, "Look, we don't need to worry about him, and it's actually better if we can get him on our side than say kill him as well," which Cassius proposes. So it's a really interesting role in that sense because the first half he's kind of just a knockabout guy, and then the death of Caesar causes this complete transformation of character.
What sounds like a fun, exciting character to play with such a big shift in him. Obviously, drama is about kind of change and transformation, but it sounds like he goes through a very major one, and he has that terrific and well-known speech, the funeral speech. Friends, Romans, countrymen. We'll come back to that. But how did you decide to find like these two parts of him? I mean, before we get into that, have you played? I mean, this is your first time with Bell Shakespeare, but have you played Shakespeare before?
Yes, I did a bit of Shakespeare at school at VCA, the Victorian College of Arts, which was many moons ago now. And that is actually where I met Pete Evans. So he came in and directed this, sort of fairly useless bunch of youngsters in a production
Students.
there. But that's where I got to meet him for the first time, and so it's been a really beautiful experience, sort of reconnecting with him, sort of 20 years later. I was then in a production of King Lear in Sydney, and then this is the first time I returned to a Shakespeare quite some time, and I must
Mm,
say, just encountering him again has I found it quite profound, to be honest. I mean, you once you start delving into these texts, you honestly have to ask yourself the question, just like, how is it possible that someone wrote this, and not just
mm,
this, but 20 of them? It really is just staggering.
hmm. And I understand, and I haven't seen it yet. I am coming, but I understand we're sort of set in the 90s in terms of time.
Yeah, it's sort of
1990s, I should say.
Yeah,
90s
it's
could be any time.
sort
Yeah.
of loosely sort of set in the 90s, but it sort of feels kind of the production is sort of very much sort of an echo of
Mm,
Rome, like it sort of feels like, the sort of design elements of it are sort of echoing the majesty of that time, but we're not sort of a toga does make an appearance, but we're not sort of in togas and or whatnot. But I think
is it a toga party you go to?
it's not that well, there is one toga party, but it doesn't end up for as a party for one particular toga wearer.
Yeah, well, I was mentioning the time because I imagine that informs your character. If you're saying that, he's like he gets the girls and he kind of gets around and I know he's quite athletic. Therefore, what kind of costumes and that is that then informing you as and your choices playing him?
Yeah, of course, all those elements sort of seep in, but I think what Pete and the designers were trying to do was just trying to reflect the wealth and power that these people have. So, we're sort of, very much in sort of white suits and whatnot, sort of echoing the sort of white togas of Rome, but without sort of, placing it directly there, and just trying to convey the class of, this is the ruling class. These are the wealthiest people in Rome. These are the people that are making the decisions, and their decisions affect the regular everyday people who are forced to suffer under whatever whims of the rulers are sort of happening. And that's a big aspect of the play, I think, is sort of there's sort of the ruling class and the populace. And obviously Mark Antony plays very much into the populace. So, it's sort of it's amazing how the play written then speaks directly to our current political moment. But what I think is really interesting, I think there would be an obvious temptation, in a sense, to, you know, regardless of your politics, sort of throw a red Aga hat on Caesar and, make Rome great,
Yeah, yeah.
really sort of go like, okay, Caesar is like this, he's a Trump-like figure who, we have all these no kings rallies happening in America at the minute. But and I was slightly nervous when Pete first approached me about the production, because I was like, well, I don't really want to play a version of sort of J.D. Vance. That didn't seem of particular interest to
Mm,
me. So it I think what Pete's actually focused in on is far more sort of complex in a way, because you're actually sort of looking at the consequence of violence, actually,
mm,
and you're looking at what violence does, and how violence, particularly sort of political violence or something like that, sets off a chain reaction which you cannot control. You don't know where that act will end, and even if your intentions are noble in the
mm,
perspective of from the perspective of the people assassinating Caesar, you don't know what the ramifications of that will be. And certainly we're seeing that in our world right now with sort of Iran and whatnot. You don't know what an act of violence will do and where that will end up. And therefore, it's actually what Peter has done is sort of present a far more humanist version, I think, of the play than perhaps sort of boxing it into a particular politics, if you will.
And so you playing this role, do you feel and getting kind of insight into, I guess, psychology of sorts? Does he cross a line? Does Mark Antony cross a line? He kind of, um,
Look, it's really interesting because prior to starting work on the production, the sort of um, I think Mark Antony's sort of presented as a sort of Machiavellian type figure in a way, somebody who's willing to use the politics of the moment to his own advantage. Um, and certainly there is an aspect of that. But actually, in this version of the production, I found his motivations sort of slightly more pure. I think he is genuinely shocked and grief-stricken by the death of his friend, and so in a sense he's sort of quite genuine in his appeal to the population of Rome. The difference between, Brutus, who is described as such a noble character and a thoughtful character, and is sort of a prototype for Hamlet. It's somebody who is racked with doubt about what is the right course of action. The difference between those two is that Antony is willing to let the city burn, to live in complete anarchy and chaos and destroy it all. As Antony's point of view is, if they've killed Caesar, we'll get the people and then we're going to kill them all. Not the people, but the ruling class. His psychology is sort of so much more extreme, or his imagination for carnage is so much more extreme than perhaps Brutus's is, which is the key difference. He's much more comfortable with anarchy and tearing down the entire system, where Brutus wants to retain the system, retain the traditions. Mark Antony, in his grief and rage, is just burn it all to the ground, and we'll see what happens after that.
yeah, yeah. And I wanted to come back to that, the famous funeral speech that Mark
Mm.
Antony gives, and playing a role or playing or speaking a speech that's so well known that people will be hearing it in their heads, looking out for it, watching it. Do you feel kind of a pressure of, each time you do it to get it right, or do you kind of, how do you prepare? I suppose, how does an actor prepare?
Well, it's definitely present, that pressure, and that people know it. So I guess I've just tried to keep it as simple as possible to what he's actually trying to do. And friends, Romans, countrymen, is he's trying to get their attention. He's trying to get them to listen to him. In that sense, that's just sort of, I'm just trying to find as much simplicity with it as I can and return to what's he actually asking? What argument is he slowly unfolding? But yeah, I'd be lying if I didn't say it's slightly daunting to encounter, but I've just tried to keep my own pathway with it and be patient with it, because it's a big sweep that he goes on there, and that's only the beginning. So you're just trying to lay little breadcrumbs of sort of invitation to the audience present in the theater, but the imagined populace of Rome as well who are there. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
and also, as frightening as it can be sometimes, it's also, you only get to encounter these roles if you're lucky once. So it's very beautiful to have a chance to encounter it and to see how it sits with you
Yeah.
and it comes out of your mouth, and what that is.
Try and enjoy it while you can, while you're in it at the same time. Oh, look, I can't wait to see it,
Yes.
Mark. I was going to say, Mark Antony, thank you for joining me. Mark Leonard Winter, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Mark Leonard Winter there. And as I said, he is getting astounding reviews for his portrayal of Mark Antony in Julius Caesar, playing for Bell Shakespeare at the moment.